Here's the truth about the early access of Titan Quest II. Will it be an alternative for Diablo players and fans of the ARPG genre? After 20 hours of playing the early access version, here is a preview of this action RPG that finally steps out of the shadows. From the opening moments, Titan Quest II feels like a spiritual successor to its 2006 predecessor, firmly rooted in Greek mythology, focused on deliberate combat. The narrative setup is more prominent than in most action RPGs, where lore is often sidelined for mechanics. Here, however, the developers have gone to great lengths to emphasize atmosphere and immersion. Every major character and even many secondary NPCs are fully voiced. Dialogues are not only functional, but genuinely entertaining, filled with mythological references and delivered with a theatrical flair that grounds the experience in its setting. The gameplay foundation will feel immediately familiar to fans of the first Titan Quest and Grim Dawn. At its heart, this is still a click-to-kill action RPG where the loop of exploration, combat, and looting drives everything forward. Yet from the beginning, it becomes clear that Grimlore Games has tried to modernize this classic framework with subtle adjustments. Combat, for instance, is intentionally slower and more grounded than in its competitors. Attacks have weight, characters plant their feet as they strike, and the pace demands timing rather than pure speed. This initially stiff feeling is softened once the player unlocks movement skills and begins experimenting with a dodge, roll, and barrier mechanics. The first major boss encounter, the Griffin, illustrates the philosophy perfectly. Rather than overwhelming the player with endless minions or chaotic area effects, the Griffin fights with telegraphed moves, a visible mana bar that hints at what attack is coming, and punishing strikes that reward observation and positioning. The battle feels cinematic without relying on spectacle alone, and it also functions as a tutorial that forces players to use every tool available: dodging, shielding, potion management, and skill deployment. The Mastery system is where Titan Quest II shows its most notable evolution. The original Titan Quest was famous for allowing players to combine two masteries to form a hybrid class. That formula returns here, but with greater depth. In the current early access version, 4 masteries are available: Warfare, Earth, Storm, and Rogue. Each of them carries dozens of active and passive skills, but more importantly, each can be modified through an extensive system of nodes and alterations. This is where Titan Quest II distinguishes itself from its predecessor. A simple melee sweep can be transformed into a channeled whirlwind attack, or a fissure spell can be reconfigured from an area of effect fire eruption into a more precise physical attack. The modifiers extend to damage types, attack patterns, projectile behavior, and even secondary effects like stuns or damage over time. What this means in practice is that two players can use the same skill in dramatically different ways, shaping it into something that supports entirely different builds. While this system does not reach the endless complexity of Path of Exile's gem linking, it provides a satisfying degree of customization without overwhelming players with convoluted mechanics. Respexing is another area where Titan Quest II embraces modern sensibilities. Skill points can be reallocated freely for a gold cost, and attributes, though tied more rigidly to your chosen playstyle, can also be reassigned at ritual shrines. This allows experimentation without the permanent consequences that once defined early ARPGs. Attributes themselves are structured around a primary and secondary system. Primary stats like might, vigor, agility, and knowledge provide the traditional bonuses to health, strength, dexterity, or intelligence, but each feeds into secondary stats such as cunning or resolve, which directly influence damage types and weapon effectiveness. This layered system ensures that character growth always feels tied to both immediate survival and long-term build shaping. Equipment, too, carries more than just numerical bonuses. Armor categories, light, medium, and heavy, alter playstyle in tangible ways. Heavy armor makes the character a resilient tank at the cost of mobility, while light armor improves dodge recovery, opening possibilities for evasive, speed-focused builds. Weapons carry consistent passive effects tied to archetype. Certain bows, for instance, may always improve projectile speed or critical chance. These mechanics encourage players to think not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of synergy between gear, attributes, and skills. The loot system, though still somewhat sparse compared to modern competitors, already offers hundreds of weapons and armor pieces alongside unique items. At present, only a few dozen uniques exist in early access, but this number is expected to expand dramatically as development progresses. Exploration plays an equally important role in Titan Quest II. The world is entirely handcrafted, following the tradition of the first game rather than relying on procedural generation. This decision immediately sets the game apart from much of the genre, giving areas a sense of identity and purpose. Hidden rooms, destructible environments, and secret caches reward players who take the time to veer off the main path. Side quests are plentiful, ranging from small errands to multi-step storylines, and they reliably reward players with rare items or stat boosts. Even dead ends feel worthwhile when they yield treasure or lore, and the structure of the maps encourages curiosity rather than speedrunning. The developers have designed the world not just as a series of combat arenas, but as a living, breathing environment that feels authentic within its mythological context. One of the most innovative additions to the early game is the presence of ritual shrines. These serve multiple purposes. They allow players to reassign attribute points, but they also function as difficulty modifiers. By offering tributes, players can increase or decrease monster difficulty, raise the level of enemies in previously cleared zones, or respawn bosses for farming. This system essentially acts as a bridge toward eventual endgame content, giving early access players a reason to revisit encounters and test builds against scaling challenges. It also introduces a layer of player-driven difficulty that caters to both casual adventurers and hardcore veterans who crave higher stakes. Performance, however, remains a weak point. Even with its bright, painterly visuals, Titan Quest II struggles with optimization. Reports from across the community point to stuttering, inconsistent frame rates, and crashes, even on high-end machines. The developers have acknowledged these problems, and given that the game is also planned for release on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X/S, it is clear that performance improvements are high on the priority list. Nevertheless, as it stands in early access, Titan Quest II demands patience from players who expect a polished technical experience. Content-wise, the early access version already offers a substantial foundation. The first act provides around 20 hours of gameplay, including 9 main quests, over a dozen side quests, and numerous world events. More than 50 enemy types populate the regions, culminating in 6 significant boss fights. Exploration spans 50 overworld zones and more than 10 dungeons, all carefully designed to balance combat, exploration, and storytelling. The sheer scale of content in this initial release ensures that even if players focus solely on a single character, they will find plenty to do. But the real appeal comes from experimentation. With 4 masteries and the ability to combine them into hybrid classes, replaying the campaign with different builds dramatically extends longevity. The roadmap is ambitious. Grimlore Games plans to release major updates every 3 months during the early access period, each adding new masteries, story chapters, gameplay features, and eventually full endgame systems. A proper character creator, crafting and enchanting systems, a transmog feature, and shared stashes are all confirmed for later updates. Multiplayer, which currently supports up to 4 players in co-op, is still rough around the edges but will be improved alongside other systems. Importantly, the developers have made it clear that there will be no microtransactions, loot boxes, or premium cosmetics. Titan Quest II will remain a premium ARPG with expansions or DLC, possibly arriving after the 1.0 release, which is currently projected for late 2026. Titan Quest II does not attempt to reinvent the genre, nor does it seek to compete directly with the complexity of Path of Exile or the live service model of Diablo 4. Instead, it doubles down on what made the original special: atmosphere, deliberate pacing, hybrid class building, and a strong connection to mythological storytelling. In doing so, it positions itself as an antidote to the excesses of modern ARPGs. For players who are tired of overwhelming skill trees, monetization schemes, or procedural sameness, Titan Quest II offers something refreshing in its simplicity and its focus on immersion. That is not to say it is without flaws. The combat, while weighty and thoughtful, can feel sluggish to those accustomed to faster-paced ARPGs. The current absence of crafting and enchanting systems leaves loot progression feeling slightly shallow compared to the original Titan Quest. Performance issues make it difficult to recommend to anyone unwilling to tolerate technical roughness. And the limited number of masteries at launch means build diversity is still in its infancy. But these criticisms must be balanced against the clear vision of the developers and the roadmap that promises to address many of these shortcomings. Titan Quest II's early access is best understood as a foundation, not a finished product. For veterans of the first game, it already delivers the familiar rhythm of exploration, combat, and loot within a setting that feels authentic to the franchise's roots. For newcomers, it provides an accessible entry point into a slower, more measured ARPG experience that values story and atmosphere as much as mechanics. Whether it evolves into something as enduring as its predecessor will depend on how well Grimlore Games can build on this foundation, expanding its systems, enriching its loot, and optimizing its performance over the next 2 years. In its current state, Titan Quest II is a promising revival that honors the past while cautiously stepping into the future. Sometimes the allure of walking through sunlit ruins, battling a griffin under the gaze of a vengeful goddess, and discovering a rare weapon in a forgotten chest is enough. Titan Quest II is not yet complete, but it is already a world worth exploring, and if Grimlore Games delivers on its roadmap, it may become one of the genre's most enduring returns.